component responsible for dealing with reality. The ego is the personality component responsible for dealing with reality. You hear that? Now, let's look at another passage. Let's go to 1 Timothy chapter 4, starting at verse 1, which reads, "But the Spirit says expressly that in later times some will fall away from the faith." Now, what it's talking about here? You're talking about people who at one point were believers. Okay? But what happened? But the Spirit says expressly that in later times some will fall away from the faith. Excuse me. Paying attention to seducing spirits and doctrines of demons. Taking heed to them. When it says seducing, it's the same term. Remember, we looked at that already. Which means to deceive, to lead astray. And doctrines of demons? So you mean, when it comes to doctrines, see, this is going back to what we talked about, the two sides again. When it comes to the seed of Elohim, there's one doctrine, Torah. That's it. But when it comes to the seed of the serpent, there are many doctrines. Okay? Doctrines of demons. He says, and we start from verse 1. I want y'all to get this thought. But the Spirit says expressly that in later times some will fall away from the faith, paying attention to seducing spirits and doctrines of demons, through the hypocrisy of men who speak lies. So, the opponent now, not only does he have other angelic beings who are his messengers, what we're learning is that these angelic beings, you know what they're doing? They are creating doctrines, and you know who they're teaching them to? They're teaching them to men, and you know what the men are doing? They're teaching them to everybody else. You see the process? There is a system at work in the world today to keep our minds blinded so that we do not accept the Torah. And it's based on who we are as individuals. But in order for us to get that, we got to have an understanding of who we are. That's part of the reason why he gave us this Spirit. But see, he has to help us. Because we didn't realize it. Look at the condition of Israel today. You got some people who like to say, well, guess what? All we got to really do is obey the word, and that's it. But if that was the case, why is Israel being judged right now? We're not in our land. We're not. We're scattered. We can't even agree on what to call the Most High. We can't even agree on what day the Sabbath is. We can't even agree on how to calculate the time to observe the annual festivals. Something's wrong. There's a problem. And you know where the problem starts? It's inside. That's where the evil is. We got to fix us. In order for us to fix us, we got to become aware of who we are. So he gave us his Torah. And we go through the word, and what Abba does when it comes to knowledge, when it comes to wisdom, when it comes to understanding. Me personally, and this is one of my pet peeves, scholarship. Pet peeve of mine. But this is what Abba helped me to understand about scholarship. Let me guide you, son. I know what's good and I know what's evil. See? I know when you're eating that, I know what's the meat that you need to keep. I know what's the bone that you need to throw away. But we all have to be on the same accord. You see? Like we said in the previous segment, how can two walk together except they be agreed? It's not talking about me and you agreeing to come together and having this big function, and then we all fellowship and we sing songs and things like that, and then when we leave the function, I go back to doing my thing, you go back to doing your thing, and we're still in disagreement. That ain't what he's talking about. You know what he's talking about? He's talking about me as an individual being in agreement with him. You as an individual being in agreement with him. And if you both are in agreement, guess what? We in agreement. not with each other. We have to be in agreement with the Creator. We are walking with the Creator, and if we all walk with the Creator, guess what? We're going to have the same mind. We're going to have the same judgment. We're not going to be divided. He said, where there is envy, where there is strife, where there is division, are ye not carnal? Let's move on. He says, but the Spirit says expressly that in later times some will fall away from the faith, paying attention to seducing spirits and doctrine of demons through the hypocrisy of men who speak lies, branded in their own conscience as with a hot iron. Something happened to the conscience. So that's our one word for today. Greek lexicon 4893, excuse me. Sunadesis. Sunadesis. Okay? It means moral consciousness. Sunadesis. Moral consciousness. Think about that. It says, verse 3, forbidding marriage. Now, when people read this, the first thing they want to jump on is Roman Catholics. Because you have priests or you have monks and you have nuns and they're not supposed to be married. No, it's more than that. It's not just that. Because when you get into it, Brother Shaul wrote, I wish that all men could be like me. In other words, I don't have a spouse. He says, but if you have that desire to be with a man or be with a woman, he said it's better for y'all to marry than to burn with that passion. You see? But my point in mentioning him, he said, I wish all men were like me. So does that mean he's forbidden to marry? No, it doesn't mean that. But he's expressing something in regard to being a unit. He chose to be a unit for the service of the Most High. That's different. So when it says forbidden to marry, we got to allow Abba to open our minds and see exactly what they're talking about. It ain't just talking about the Roman Catholic Church. That ain't even the purpose. But people want to just limit it and think that's what it is. It's not that. It's something else. He says, and commanding to abstain from foods which Elohim created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and know the truth. Now see, people like to run here and say, hold up, man. Y'all saying we can't eat this and can't eat that. No. It is the Torah that determines what we can and we can't eat. So people will run here and think, well, we can eat everything because what y'all doing, y'all commanded us to abstain. Abba did that. Listen to what he says. And commanded to abstain from foods which Elohim created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and know the truth. Now, he said this particular food was created to be received with thanksgiving. You go back to Genesis, when Noah is given the command to separate those animals before they get in the ark. This is before Moshe time. Okay? It was a distinction between clean animals and unclean animals. The clean animals, what we come to recognize, not only were they the ones that were able to be offered for sacrifice, but they were also the ones that were going to become consumable by human beings for food. And then he says, by those who believe and know the truth. Sanctify them through your truth. Your word is truth. In other words, those who believe and know the word. Listen to what he says. Verse 4. For every creature of Elohim is good and nothing to be rejected if it is received with thanksgiving. People run here and say, oh, you can eat anything. No, that's not what he's saying. Let's not lose sight. He's talking about the one that was created to be received with thanksgiving. Sure, everything is good that Abba created. That swine is good for the purpose that Abba created it. That crab and that shrimp is good for the purpose that Abba created it. But it's not to be received with thanksgiving. He's talking about the clean foods right here. Listen to what he said. He says, for every creature of Elohim is good and nothing is to be rejected if it is received with thanksgiving. For it is sanctified, set apart. It is sanctified by the word first and by prayer. My prayer does not sanctify something that Abba has deemed to be unclean. Hold up, brother. He said, what I have clean, call not thou common. He ain't talking about food in that passage. He talking about people. That's why Brother Kepler said, the Creator showed me that he opened up the door to receive the Gentiles now. It ain't had nothing to do with no food. The food only symbolized the unclean people. He's teaching us something in that. All the unclean food, it points to different characteristics. Guess what? Personality traits. And he doesn't want us to eat this type of food, but he also wants us to focus on these types of people. Think about the type of people that only come around you when they want something. They only call you when they want something. If they don't want anything, you don't hear from them. Like that swine. That swine only going to come around you when he wants something. But if you don't want nothing from you, it's going to be difficult to get that swine to come to you. Okay? It talked about character traits. But anyway, let's keep it moving. He says, and the same thing with the conscience. In Titus chapter 1 and verse 15. To the pure, all things are pure. But to those who are defiled and unbelieving, nothing is pure. But both their mind and their conscience are defiled. So in other words, be not conformed to this world. See, what we're learning, when we are conformed to this world system, which is governed by the opponent and his minions and the men who serve under them, our spirit is defiled. That's why he says we have to separate and come from among them. Doesn't mean that you got to move from among them. Because if that was the case, if we look at Yahushua as an example, they condemned him. They ostracized him because he hung around with what they believe were the publicans and the sinners. If it means that, he wouldn't have never been around them. That's not what he means. He's talking about that mind. You can live in the midst of it, but if your mind is not caught up with everything that's going on around you, see? We do no good not around people. He didn't give us this word so we can just get off onto our own and do. There's an old saying, each one teach one. You see? How are you going to be an example to somebody? You got to be among them. If they in darkness and you walking in the light and you living that word in their presence, when you come around, they're going to see that light. We're going to see something in a minute, though. They're supposed to see that light. They can't see that light if you separate and you're not living among them. He wants us to be in the midst of them, but not partakers of what they do. Israel was in the midst of Egypt. It was dark, but there was light in Goshen. But let's move on. Some people may say, well, hold up, but he took them out. That's a greater gift, a greater revelation. He's showing through Israel being brought forth, being up, out of. This is what's going to happen to us too. Guess what? We can still live here and be brought up and out because, again, our mind is what's being elevated. As the heavens are higher than the earth, you can live next door to nothing but straight up and down heathen. But guess what? Your mind is a mind of Torah now. You don't think the way the rest of the world thinks. You don't see things the way the rest of the world think or see. Your perception is changed. See? He's doing the reversal of what the opponent did. The opponent was one of the mechanisms responsible for defiling the mind of humanity. Abba created a system to clean it back up again. That's all. Let's keep going so we can get through this. Now, defense mechanisms. Defense mechanisms are unconscious psychological responses that protect people from feelings of anxiety and fear, psychological pain and trauma, unacceptable urges, threats to self-esteem, and things that they don't want to think about or deal with. Let me read that again. Defense mechanisms are unconscious psychological responses. So there's something in us that we are hardwired to do. Self-preservation. But again, the question is, which self are we trying to preserve? We already talked about when we start off as the seed of the serpent. So the defense mechanisms are going to kick in whenever there is a threat to who we are, who we have become. Defense mechanisms are unconscious psychological responses that protect people from feelings of anxiety and fear. I'm not going to get into the details of all this because time won't allow, but I will go throughout the course of the segments we got coming up. We'll touch back on some of these things according to His divine will. Psychological pain and trauma, unacceptable urges, threats to self-esteem, and things that they don't want to think about or deal with. So what we don't want to do, we don't want to limit defense mechanism to what sociology teaches, to what psychology teaches. We want to look at it on a broader stage now. Because we're talking about the battle for our souls. Okay? Listen to this. Now, and the point that is being made about defense mechanism, right? Then I got a passage we want to look at. Don't just focus on what we're learning as far as the psychology and psychosociology, right? Defense mechanisms are also a response being presented with the truth of Torah, which is a threat to our ego. Who we are. It's a threat to who we want to be. That's why he said, mortify the deeds of the flesh. We're going to see something. Remember what we read in Romans 1:32. They know the judgment of Elohim. They know these things is wrong. Why do they know these things is wrong? The superego. Man knows when he's doing something wrong. There's a part in us because that spirit that Abba gave us, that's still his part of his essence. That's why you get some people, he said, like he just mentioned, you got the reprobates. But then, as we just read, having their conscience seared with the hot iron. In other words, like, we're going to burn it out to the point where you can't even determine what's good or evil anymore. So what's going to happen? The prophet Isaiah said, the time is coming, they're going to call good evil and evil good. Darkness, light, light, darkness. Sweet, bitter, bitter, sweet. The opposites. Why is that? People's conscience is being burned and branded and seared to the point they don't determine that anymore. So that thing that people are supporting, the masses are supporting, and they don't think it's wrong because they don't see anything wrong with it anymore. At one point they viewed it as wrong, but now, to each his own. Let's move on. Matthew chapter 16, verses 24 to 26. Then Yahushua told his Talmudim, if anyone wants to come after me, let him say no to himself. Self-denial. We don't want to deny ourselves. Let's be honest about it. We do not want to deny ourselves. The pleasure principle. See? Then Yahushua told his Talmudim, if anyone wants to come after me, let him say no to himself, deny himself, take up his execution stake, and keep following me. For whoever wants to save his own life will destroy it. If we try to save and maintain ego, who we are, we die. But Whoever destroys his life, whoever destroys ego for my sake will find it. What good will it do someone if he gains the whole world but forfeits his life? Or what can a person give in exchange for his life? What can you give in exchange for your soul? This is the only opportunity you got. The dash. The dash is the only opportunity we got. What are we going to choose? This is the only chance we're going to get to choose life or death, the blessing or the curse. This is the only opportunity. What will we choose? Since our carnal mind, human nature, is opposition against Elohim, because it is not subject to Torah, how will defense mechanism work in us? I'm going to repeat that question. Since our carnal mind or human nature is opposition against Elohim, because it is not subject to Torah, how will defense mechanism work in us? In an effort to avoid the pressure that accompanies the biblical lifestyle. Nobody wants that pressure. And there is pressure. Because we got to deny something. That's pressure. In an effort to avoid the pressure that accompanies the biblical lifestyle, we incorporate our unconscious psychological responses which threaten who we want to be. In other words, when you think about defense mechanism, you know what they consider to be? Ineffective coping. Remember, we just looked at it. These are the different ways that we are hardwired to deal with situations that are negative. They're things that we're not supposed to be doing. But people only look at it in the sense of how sociology teaches it, how psychology teaches it. Now we want to see defense mechanism in the scope of how Yahweh teaches it. So there's several defense mechanisms, okay? We're only going to look at 3 of them, okay? The first one that we're going to look at is denial. That's a defense mechanism. Now let me read the example to you. Being the victim of a violent crime, yet denying that the incident occurred. And that's how it plays out from a sociological or psychological perspective, right? But denial is denying that something exists. So, I read several stories, throughout the course of the years that I've been walking with the Most High. One of the things that I come across, and we're going to look at something in regard to atheism, agnosticism, give us the time. When it comes to these different belief systems, what you're going to find is that denial that this exists is like an effort to prevent themselves from having to live according to this way. Okay, it's easier for me to just to say, oh, that doesn't exist. I don't believe that. I don't accept that. Like you talk to people and they say, oh, I'm not religious. I don't believe in God. As if that now, oh, since I don't believe that, that means that I'm free. I can do what I want to do now. I don't have to, keep the Sabbath day. Oh, well, why can't you come out and hang out on Friday night? Oh, the Sabbath. Oh, I don't believe in God. I don't keep that. So, in other words, when they say that, that means I can go out on a Sabbath day. I can go out and hang and mess around on Friday evening. Or on Saturday during the day. I can do whatever it is I want to do because I don't believe in the existence of God. I don't believe in it. You understand the point? Denial. That's a defense. That is a defense mechanism. Okay? Now, another one. This intellectualization falls right in with intellectualism. That's not by coincidence. That's by design. Well, who designed it? That old serpent called the devil and the opponent. Well, what you mean he designed it? Because we just read a passage that talks about how people are going to start losing faith as a result of being seduced, right? Or deceived by spirits and doctrine of demons. So if you have a doctrine of demons, that means the demons have to get together and say, this is going to be a teaching that we're going to use to keep man perverted. And they put it in who speak lies by men who speak lies and hypocrisy, or who speak hypocrisy through lies. I just reversed it, but you get the point because we just read the passage. So we're going to concoct a doctrine, we're going to give it to man, and we're going to motivate this man to teach this doctrine. See, one of the things that we have to understand, we live in a world